philosopher, Freemason, antiquarian, jurist, historian, Robert W.Sullivan IV, and we're gonna talk about some exciting subject matter. We talked with you, Robert, briefly on the announcement of the RFK Jr. Running for the presidency in 2024. And he made some waves again, repeating the claims about his uncle, John F. Kennedy, and the involvement of CIA in his assassination. And previously, he made another remarks, not only this year, but also 5 years ago, about the involvement of the CIA on the assassination of his own father in 1968. And I believe he knows some details which are not very well known to the general public. We know that the Palestinian refugee Sirhan is still in a custody since 1968. He's I believe again eligible for the parole. Previous attempts to get paroled were turned down, but he denied his involvement actually in assassination multiple times, claiming that he doesn't remember anything. He did this claim right away after his arrest, and he maintained his innocence right through the over 50 years of his imprisonment. So, do you have any new details concerning the assassination of the Kennedy brothers and some occult side of the story? Because obviously, the occult side of the story is present in both assassinations, especially in John F. K. JFK. It's 100% sure, because we know already many details involving some kind of synchronicities with usual 33, the involvement of a local, let's say, local crime bosses, mafia bosses, CIA, and even possible involvement of Bush Sr. in the assassination. And the setting of the assassination of JFK in Dallas resembles very much on some occult symbology, and we touch this in the future, I hope. But what do you know about the brain removal of JFK in Parkland?
Right. Well, thank you, Dean, for having me back on your show. I was on another podcast about 4 or 5 months ago, and I was just on usual, talking my usual stuff, Freemasonry, movie symbolism, and somehow or another, the Kennedy assassination got brought up. I made the comment. I said, "Well, I know where Kennedy's brain is," and it was quite. It was relayed to me in a story from a Kennedy insider. So it's important for you to know, and for the listeners to know, I have no firsthand knowledge of this. This was told to me by somebody, but the person who told me the story, I had no reason to disbelieve. And it wasn't any great big secret or anything. This person just casually told me, he said, I know where the brain is. He told the story to me. I'm going to tell it to you. Again, I have no firsthand knowledge of this, but it makes sense. I've always believed the story. And the story is this, that when Kennedy was shot in 1963 in Dallas, when the body was returned, there was no federal law at the time that made the assassination of a president a federal crime. It was a state crime. It would have been tried in Dallas, Texas by the Dallas DA, the Dallas District Attorney. So as such, the autopsy of the president should have been done at Parkland Hospital. Of course, we know it wasn't. It was flown, some would say illegally, back to Maryland, back to Washington, D.C., and the autopsy was done at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And it's very sketchy, what happened. I mean, there's all sorts of strange stories about it, doctors burning autopsy notes, etc. You know the story. Well, anyway, this is where the brain was removed. And the story goes that the brain was removed and was basically, essentially, evidence that could possibly dissect the tract of the bullet to see if the bullet had come from behind, as was claimed in the Warren report, which most people think, myself included, is BS, or that it came from the front, which is likely. And of course, if it comes from the front, there's more than one shooter. At any rate, the brain was my understanding of it was put into a jar, formaldehyde, stored, and it was kept in the National Archives as evidence. And if you ever seen the movie, the JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, there's a bit in there where they say, we subpoenaed the National Archives to get the president's brain, and it wasn't there. It's vanished. And this is where the story that it was told to me as to what happened to the brain. And it's not really scandalous or anything, and it's not really even conspiratorial, but I will tell you the story that was told to me. And again, I have no reason to disbelieve this story, but again, I have no firsthand knowledge of it. So, keep that in mind. The story that was told to me was that in 1967, John F. Kennedy, the president, his body was moved in Arlington to where it is now. It was originally in a different location. It wasn't too far away, but it was moved to where it is now, with the, torch on top of it. Everybody's seen the pictures of it all over the place. You can Google it if you don't know. When the body was removed in 67, the story that was told to me was Robert F. Kennedy Sr., the former Attorney General, got access surreptitiously to the National Archives and removed the brain in 1967 and placed the brain in Kennedy's casket, his brother's casket, and the brain is actually buried with John F. Kennedy in Arlington National Cemetery. His motivation for this is what was told to me, was that Robert Kennedy Sr., RFK Jr.'s father, was terrified of the brain falling into the hands of a private collector or someone who's going to put it on display and charge him, like in a carnival or something like that. This kept him awake at night, and he was deathly afraid that his brother's brain was going to be exhibited somewhere as kind of like a carnival sideshow. So Robert F. Kennedy got into the National Archives, took the brain out, and this would have been in 1967, and placed the brain in his brother's coffin when it was being removed in Arlington, and that the brain is in fact buried at Arlington National Cemetery in his brother's coffin. I was on a radio show about 3 or 4 months ago, and a caller called in, and they kind of confirmed this. One of the things that someone said to me was, if RFK wanted to prove a conspiracy, he would have kept the brain because of the tract of the bullet. And someone else called in who seemed to know more about autopsies and things like that. And this person had said, who had some experience with this, said after about 4 years, even kept in formaldehyde, that the brain at that point in time would have been probably in a liquefied state, and no examination of it could have been made anyway. So take the story for whatever you will. But I believe it. Unfortunately, for various reasons, I cannot identify the person who told me this story, other than to say that the person who did say this to me is no longer alive. So say that they are deceased, but I'm not going to give up this person's identity for various reasons. But anyway, I will say that this person was a Kennedy insider. He was very well connected. I have no reason to disbelieve him. And that was the story as to where John F. Kennedy's brain is located.
This is a really interesting story, because I paid attention to the brain story since, I believe, 20 years ago, since I saw for the first time the picture president lying down on the autopsy table. And I believe this part of the brain from these shattered backside of the skull look very, very suspicious. So some experts in photography said that the picture was actually doctored, and that yes, there's no way the actual wound could have been of such shape. And since I started following the story, I paid attention that one of the, I believe, a chief naval doctor from the Bethesda, he is the guy who probably within 2 years went out of the window, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was a colonel, I think, of the medical services in who was involved in this autopsy of his brain, and his death and death of the other, I think, over 70 people. Yes. Since the assassination of the JFK, since 1963, died under very suspicious circumstances. So, in any case, we may never know who actually and for what purposes were involved in the assassination. But definitely CIA and the other governmental organization were busy with the heavy cover-up of the consequences and the investigation of the assassination. So that's certain, because all these people, including all this one prostitute which actually went by car with the police officers, and she was talking about that someone gonna kill the president. And indeed, within 3 days, the assassination happened, and nobody found this lady ever again. She was found dead, I believe, after weeks. And there's the famous journalist Mary Kilgallen, and the others who were involved in the interview, and Jack Ruby. So the list of the people who were involved and firsthand into the investigation of the assassination and the witnesses were dead under very, very suspicious circumstances. But what actually caused the most attention of mine, at least, and I think it's might be the subject of your research, in case if you don't know. When President Kennedy got elected, he sent out 77 invitation cards to the White House inauguration party. I saw these cards online, posted by the collector, and the last invitation card was under the number 77. And if you read the gematria, so numerology of the name Kennedy, last name Kennedy, it sums up to 77. So someone, maybe he personally, JFK personally, or someone who was actually running his day-to-day affairs, was actually privy to this kind of coincidence. So they send out namely 77 cards, and many of the people who actually were involved in the either witnessing the assassination or investigation died while 77 years old, including his own brother, Ted Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken. He was not very healthy man. He had a brain tumor, but it caused my attention that a long row of the people involved in either witnessing or related directly to the president or to investigation died when they were 77, including the main witness.
Right.
So I think it's
what I was going to add was the one witness was Domingo Benavides. He was the guy who saw Tippit being shot, and he said Oswald didn't shoot Tippit. He identified someone else. They brought him in front of a lineup, and he didn't identify Oswald. He couldn't identify the shooter, but he said it wasn't Oswald. And then there was Lee Bowers, who was a railway worker, who saw men running around behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll, and he died. Domingo Benavides died like a karate chop. He was walking down the street, and he just kicked over dead, and they examined him. He got hit in the head, in the neck with a karate blow. No one knows how or what happened. And then Domingo Benavides was like run off the road. He died. And again, no one knows what happened. There were no witnesses or anything. It's fascinating that you bring up the number 77, because, as you know, that is a very interesting number within the world of the occult. If you are familiar with Aleister Crowley, that is the number of the goat of Mendez. You get into the Kennedy assassination at Dealey Plaza with the roads, the highway overpasses Route 77 that Kennedy was heading towards. Route 77 goes by Waco, Texas. Waco, Texas compound set on 77 acres. Of course, 77 is all over 9/11. So, yeah, I mean, whenever you're dealing with that number, you got to take pause, because that number is very ominous and always seems to turn up in some form or fashion when you're dealing with the government and the occult. And whether it's intentional or not, we could argue about, but it always seems to be there.
Let alone that the whole setup of the assassination on the Dealey Plaza, because Mr. Dealey, he was a publisher. He used to be, I believe, a 33rd degree Freemason, and very powerful figure in a Dallas and overall in a Texas history. triple underpass looked like, I believe, like a bell, and it looks like a bell, right? If you're looking from the top, so it's kind of looks like a Masonic symbol. But what actually attracted my attention as well. I don't know if you are familiar with the serial which is called Route 66.
I've heard about it, yes.
Which ran from 1961 to, I believe, 1964. I don't know if you're actually familiar, but there's an episode which is called "I'm Here to Kill the King," and the plot of the episode is when someone from the CIA or some kind of special services in U.S. conspires with the chief bodyguard or chief of the personal detachment of some Middle Eastern king to conspire to kill the king while visiting the U.S. And you know where this king goes? The king goes to the Dallas, and he's supposed to ride right under the triple underpass. And this episode of Route 66 was supposed to be shown, believe it or not, on 22nd of November 1963, on the day of the assassination. When you try now to access the information when it was supposed to be aired, it wasn't aired on 22nd because of obvious reason, right? So when you try to now access the information, they give you different dates are somewhere in December, somewhere in January 1964, but not 22nd of November. But many years ago, when I was sifting through the data which was still available online, it showed that actually, I don't remember, was it NBC or CBS? They were supposed to air exact on 22nd. But there's more to it. If you look at the episode itself, of course, the whole plot rigs the supposed future Kennedy assassination, because obviously they made the episode prior to the assassination, so right. it's obvious. First, they showing on the wall 9/11, so the hands of the clock on 9 and 11. It was shown clearly. Second of all, there are twins, let's say supposed twins. They're doppelgangers, actually. There's a CIA agent and his doppelganger, which is a simple guy, the simpleton, which was supposed to be used in the assassination. So it's kind of twins and 9/11. But there's more to it. Not in this episode, but in several previous episodes, there was the actress called Tuesday Weld, which was very well known, and sure. She comes from a very powerful family. You know that Mr. Weld, I suppose, he was just recently the governor of Virginia.
I think it was Massachusetts. I think maybe.
Oh, Massachusetts! It's very powerful family. They have several governors. So one of them was very recently. This Tuesday Weld was a very well-known open Satanist. But most interesting that she comes from a family, believe it or not, she is a direct descendant of the assassin of the President Garfield. And she was actually in the Route 66 episodes, not in this particular one, but in the other ones.
That's crazy.
And if you look at the episode where she actually stars, the guy passes the traffic sign and it says on a traffic sign, Kilkenny, Dallas, and some other place. So Kilkenny. You get the smell of it, right? Right. And there is no Kilkenny. It's not Ireland, right? There's Kilkenny in Ireland, but there is no Kilkenny in Texas, and especially it wasn't there in 1963. So there's Dallas, Kilkenny, and some other town. I believe Waco. So Waco was there. So actually three places, out of which one was fictional, which was actually pointing onto assassination. Kill Kennedy, Kilkenny. So this is just absolutely, absolutely crazy. And
is the episode online? Can the episode?
It is. If you don't find it, I'll get it to you. I copied it somewhere. It's just mind blowing.
I'd love to see this episode. Yeah.
Okay. So the episode was the Tuesday Welt. It's called "Love is a Skinny Kid," and the episode with the king assassination, it's called "I'm Here to Kill the King." So believe it or not, it's just blatantly open. And there are more references to, for example, Marilyn Monroe, because Tuesday Welt actually walks amongst the tombstones, and there's the grave of someone called, I believe, with double M. So very, very, very much similar to the Marilyn Monroe. And also, if you look into the filmography of Tuesday Welt and Marilyn Monroe, they both actually star in the movies. One stars in the TV movie, and another one stars in the actual big Hollywood movie, which is Marilyn Monroe. Right. So there's some kind of made interconnection as usual when one movie leads to another one, and they all interconnected by the same directors or either same actors or something like that. So it's a usual Hollywood trickery, which is there. You will pick it up immediately when you see the at least those two episodes. There are more episodes, but those two are just mind blowing.
I'm going to take a look at them. I'm going to take a look at those to see if I can't find them online, because I mean, if I got to see those for myself, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, they shown the conspirators, the one from the CIA and this, I believe the Middle Eastern chief of guard. They meeting under where, under the same place where Marilyn Monroe stands in Niagara. They meeting in the same spot, in a very same grotto.
Right, in the grotto. Yeah.
So they cross-referencing several movies, interconnecting Tuesday Welt, Marilyn Monroe, Kennedies, and others.
Yeah,
yeah, it is. And so there's a huge occult undercurrent in the both assassinations, and as RFK Jr. actually claimed in 2017, he actually posted his in his account in Instagram the information about what he believed was the actual assassin of his father. This is the guy called Eugene Cesar Taine. I don't know actually what is his first name, what is the last name, because it follows like this: Taine, Eugene Cesar. So I don't know where's the first name, where's the last name. And he died on the Philippines on September the 11th.
Right.
And 2 hours later, RFK posts his claim that he knows that he was the actual assassin, and he was standing behind his father. And actually, Sirhan didn't shoot his father from a front. In turn, the fatal shot was fired by this Eugene Cesar Taine from behind. And you can see actually on some pictures which are available from the hotel where the assassination in 1968 took place, that his uniformed cappy is actually sticking out of the crowd because he is a big guy.
Right.
So this is insane. There's a lot of occult or media. I don't know what do you call it. Actually, there's many things which cannot be just a mere coincidence in this.
No, when you look at it, like in my opinion, it just seems to be like beyond the ability of like a human hand. I mean, it definitely seems to be some sort of occult, supernatural power at work here, especially when you get into the numbers. We talked about some of the stuff with 9/11. With the numbers with that. I mean, you have the one guy, George Bush, Bush 41, 11 years earlier to the day, giving the New World Order speech. I mean, to the day, 11, and then of course
September 11th, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, and it's just the number 11 just turns up all over the place. And again, if you get into the Crowley numerology, gematria, Kabbalah, I mean, what these numbers mean and represent, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, the thing with RFK's assassination was, I think I mentioned this to you the last time, was, I mean, it was clear that Sirhan always said that he was a Manchurian candidate, and then of course you had the movie The Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra, and in there the trigger thing was the Queen of Diamonds playing card, and the Sirhan, and the thing was the woman in the polka dot dress was the thing that was the trigger thing that sent snapped him and put him in his trance and turned him into the assassin. And then there was a woman. There's a mysterious woman photographed, the woman in the polka dot dress, who no one knows who it was and no one's identified, or at least adequately. So yeah, I mean, when you get into the occult, the numbers, the movies, I mean, one of the ones I found was really interesting. I was going back and I was watching all the old James Bond movies. I can't remember if I told you this the last time, but it was Thunderball. And I just thought this was really, really fascinating, was in Thunderball when Spectre is meeting with Blofeld. And of course, Blofeld is based upon Aleister Crowley, especially the Blofeld on Her Majesty's Secret Service, where Blofeld's trying to fake his coat of arms. If you read about it, when Crowley was in Egypt, he was running around calling himself Lord Boleskine, pretending to be nobility, pretending to be royalty. Of course, it was all a hoax. And of course, Fleming took that and invested it into Blofeld, who was trying to pass himself off as French royalty on Her Majesty's Secret Service. But if you watch Thunderball, Blofeld is at the meeting with Spectre, and two of the agents he accuses of embezzling money from them. And the two agents are sitting next to each other, and the two agents are number 9 and number 11 of all things. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you just can't, I mean, number 9 and number 11, he winds up executing number 9. He electrocutes him in the chair, and he dies. And of course, the chair drops down into the ground. Then when you watch the next James Bond movie, which is You Only Live Twice, this is one in Japan, number 11 is still around. And of course, this is the movie where Blofeld kills number 11 by throwing into the tank with the piranhas. So Blofeld, in those two movies, kills both number 9 and number 11 of all things. I mean, of all the numbers to pick, I mean, it's just uncanny.
It runs right from the outset, because the first time that James Bond introduced to the general public in the movie, Casino Royale, which was the first part, 1960 or 1961, Sean Connery shows up in a doorway of the Casino Royale, and meanwhile he looks onto the French roulette, and you know where the ball falls? On 9 and 11. Right. So it's just, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence, because first Mr. Fleming was actually a devotee of Aleister Crowley and others. So there's no accidental connections to the occult, because he was into it from his early years. And also there's some allegations of people from the British special services that Fleming was actually doing some secret service and for His Majesty in his earlier years. For example, somebody ascribes him actually the kidnapping of Martin Bormann, because, official story runs like this: Bormann disappeared. Maybe he was dead somewhere by trying to escape Berlin, surrounded by Russians. Nobody found his body anyway. But there is the guy who published the book. He was the member of the British intelligence, and his father was a member of British intelligence, and he actually. He believes that Ian Fleming and his team were actually directly involved into the abduction of Martin Bormann for the purposes of interrogation and some kind of getting secret information out of him. So I believe in this information, although of course the British deny this, but it looked very much credible when I read this. I forgot the name of the author now, but because I read it about, I think, 15 years ago. But it's very interesting read, and the guy who actually who published the book, he was himself a member of the British intelligence, and his father was one of the British intelligence officer who directly knew the involvement of Ian Fleming into this secret operation. So these guys are no joke, and of course, not strangers to the occult. Same as Mr. Robert, not Robert, Parsons, Jack Parsons, right?
Oh, of course.
The founder of Jet Propulsion Lab, who was actually the devotee of Crowley. Yeah. And he started his own church as well. So these guys are not strangers.
You had Parsons, who was a Crowley's really hardcore devotee in the United States, and he's basically the godfather of American rocketry. And he founded JLP on Halloween. I mean, of all dates to pick. And then, of course, like you said, you had Crowley was known to Fleming. Fleming was his handler during World War II. I mean, in that circle also was Dennis Wheatley, of course, who did The Devil Rides Out. And of course, Crowley's in that with Okada. And then the other guy who hung around with these guys was Roald Dahl, who did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He was another guy, and you'll find, the occult and these hermetic themes going on in his work. And I think Dahl actually did the script for You Only Live Twice. I think he was the guy who wrote the script for that. He was buddies with all those guys. So yeah, they're all interconnected. There's all, the occult's involved with all of them. And it's just, like you said, with those guys, with the British intelligence guys, it's really easy to pin down.